Welcome to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Discover the personal drive, professional journeys, and business strategies that have made a real impact. It's success from the inside out.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we're chatting with Wendy Giuffre, a seasoned human resources professional with over 30 years of generalist experience. As the president and principal consultant at Wendy Ellen Inc., Wendy has been leading her firm since 2005, helping clients across Western Canada and the United States. She brings hands-on practical HR expertise, having worked with a wide range of industries. Wendy is also the co-author of The Only HR Best Practice You'll Ever Need, the book. So first of all, Wendy, welcome to the show. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're working on?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. So, just like we said, we're an HR consulting firm. There's 11 of us, and we work with small to mid-sized business. We work in all industries. So I think that's kind of what's kept us going for 20 years through the downturns in the oil patch, COVID, everything is, we're not industry specific. So actually what the most fun about what we do is the businesses we work in and getting to know the businesses. And because they're small to mid-size, we usually work with the business owners or the C-suite, and we become a piece of that business, outsourced, but a piece of that business. So to us, it's more about the relationships. Probably I can speak for all of my consultants. None of us would really care if we never wrote another policy in our entire lives, but that is a part of the work and we're happy to do it. But it's sort of the other stuff that's enjoyable to us.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Yeah, policy work is, there are some people that really, really enjoy it. Those people are crazy. It's a little bit tedious sometimes. And I actually think somebody told me the other day that writing policy is so much easier now with AI. I said, I think maybe the grammar part of writing policy is easier with AI, but there's so much information out there and there's so many different jurisdictions on different rules and whatnot that I think people are end up in a lot of trouble if they solely focus on that.
Sure they can. Yeah, well, I mean, and also it's the application of the policy, right? So
yeah,
you can find anything you want online with or without AI. It's, does it work for your business and are you applying it right? That's the key, right? So that's, we'll just work with it from there.
That's fair. That's fair. So really what you guys are doing is you're that outsourced HR support. So kind of almost on like the fractional HR side of things.
Exactly what we used to call it retained services. Fractional is kind of the go-to word now. So yeah, we call it fractional HR. We have a number of different sort of agreements, arrangements. And we're a little bit different, maybe. I don't really firmly believe in locking into contracts, so we don't. So it's, you like what we do, please pay our invoice and we'll keep working for you. So we're kind of that kind of firm. And I'm happy to say that most people pay their invoices, so I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And who is your typical client? Like I know you said usually that like small to mid-size range, but what does that look like?
So typically, let's say 5 employees. So it really, revenue doesn't really matter. Like revenue could be 100,000 to 100 million. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's more number of employees. So 5 to 100 is where 100 employees. You probably want someone in-house that at least does the administrative side of HR. We often do sort of some of the senior advising and employee relations issues. And then once you get in around 100, 150, you need someone that has, some experience in HR.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's our sweet spot. I would say the majority of our clients are in around the 50 to 75 employees. And then we sit on site sometimes with some of our, some of our clients, we're actually at their facility on site a day a week or 2 days a week or a day every 2 weeks, that kind of thing, just so that HR is kind of a personal thing. So people get to trust you and see your face and
get more familiar with you.
One
thing I've always found interesting on HR, and I maybe just want to get your take on this, if this has maybe changed from what my perception is that typically you don't see HR on a lot of C-suites unless it's a very large organization. Are you seeing that shift at all where HR is becoming more part of a C-suite level?
that people in the HR world would like to see that. And I think you're right. In the big corporations, chief people officer, chief whatever you want to call them. But in the smaller business, we do sit a lot of times at that leadership table offering sort of strategy around HR. So it's not as big a role in the smaller businesses, just like they also sometimes, don't have a chief operating officer and chief technology officer, all those C-suite roles. But we're definitely, when we work with those businesses, like I said, typically it's the business owner or the CFO or whatever. So we see our advisory services at that level.
Yeah. One thing I always find funny is I'm an accountant by trade, so I work in the finance sector, and so I've been in different CFO roles and whatnot, and I always find it funny that quite often HR gets put under finance. You could not have a worse leadership type of person to look after HR.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense. In every organization that I have ever been a part of, I've always said to them, no, this is not for me to look after. This is maybe the COO can oversee this, or so that's always a funny thing to me. Do you run into that?
Stems from payroll often, right? So payroll is often in the finance area. Payroll and HR are very highly connected. So I think that's where it is. It often does us well though, because that's not their skill set. They need someone like us. So
right.
And on the flip side, to look on the positive, it often does us well.
Well, that's good. I like that you're looking at it that way. What's your background? How did you get into this?
So it's interesting. I worked at a big oil and gas right out of university. I was hired as a technical writer, and ended up supervising that group at the ripe old age of like 23. So I don't know what they were thinking back then, but it was the big downturn, and so they got rid of all those kind of ancillary departments. And I was put into human resources. So I was there for 14, 15 years. My now ex-husband had a financial advisory business. So I started working on the group benefits side and realized that the companies that we were selling group benefit assistance, which I had the knowledge to offer. So I formally grouped that together in 2005. And since then, I've done a lot of different sorts of, I've done a master's program at NYU, I've done an MBA. So just kind of furthered my business knowledge through my own endeavors, and the School of Hard Knocks owning a business as well. So grew from me to now 11. Yeah.
Okay. And what brought you into that business in particular? Like when did you say, yes, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to structure it.
It was probably just because my ex-husband at the time, there was an opportunity for me to step out of the, we were starting a family, young kids. It was an opportunity for flexibility and to do something different. Not the kind of person to just sit. And I found, in those big companies, you get sort of pigeonholed into one area, and that's where you stay, right? So although now looking at some of my coworkers from back then, and they have these wonderful rich pensions, I probably could have made a different choice, but it kind of just grew from there, and it worked well. And my consultants also all enjoy that flexibility. So I have consultants that have been with me for 12 years, 13 years. Like they just don't leave, because we do great work, we have great clients, and there's so much flexibility.
Yeah. Well, and that's always that nice thing about that fractional type of work is maybe you only want to work 20 hours a week. Maybe
that's right.
You work 50 hours a week. You get that flexibility over time for sure to be able to do that.
Yeah.
What for somebody sitting back there, and I think everybody knows the answer to this, but maybe you can give a more in-depth answer on it. But what is human resources? Like, why do we need human resources in the business world? And this comes from a finance guy, don't forget.
Yeah. So, that is a very valid question. There's some nuts and bolts pieces to it: payroll, compensation. We get into companies and they have no guidelines on compensation. So they hire someone, what do you want to be paid? So their comp doesn't make sense, and eventually it catches up to them. So those are policy, of course, being compliant with legislation, those kinds of things. That's kind of the HR that people know. We, on the other side, sort of the employee relations side, get into a lot of, disability case management is huge now. A lot of, mental health, unfortunately, is costing that industry, the disability claims industry, a lot of money. So there's management issues that you deal with day to day. I do a lot of work in the conflict resolution area myself.
Okay. Yeah.
So I do that myself. We do investigations on harassment. So there's all these other sides that of HR that people that don't, if you run a business and it runs relatively smoothly and you don't have issues, you maybe wouldn't think of those things. But recruiting's another one. That's a lot of people think HR is recruiting. That's a big part of it. But it kind of gets, more and more around the right fit in recruiting, not just posting a job and interviewing people.
Sure.
So there is a lot more, it used to be called the softer sides of HR, but more on that sort of people relationship, now with remote work, all that stuff is just bringing a bunch of new, interesting, and also really advantageous things around working with people, but challenges for the business owner as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say HR, HR has been important, I think, for a very long time, but I think COVID really brought a lot of that to light. And you mentioned a couple there, right? We have increased mental health issues, and that costs businesses money, right? Maybe not right directly, but it is going to cost those businesses money over time. You have issues around recruitment and people looking for jobs. So now you're trying to create the culture to retain that talent. And it's HR. I always find is one of those things where you wish you had something in place when shit hits the fan, and you look back and go,
Exactly. Yeah.
"Oh my God, why didn't we have a policy around this?" And that might cost you $100,000 to not have that policy in place.
Yeah, wrongful, when you let someone go and you don't do it right,
Yeah.
can cost you money. And unfortunately, that is a lot of the reasons we get brought into places, because they have made errors or have had things go sideways. And so there is, that oftentimes is sort of where something has happened that's triggered that, or they've had a good friend that's happened in their business, those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If you were, like I said, kind of before we started airing here, a lot of the listeners that we have are very entrepreneurial, driven, passionate. A lot of them would have businesses or work high up in their businesses. What advice do you have for those, say, the small business owners or the entrepreneurs around the human resources field?
Well, part of it, of course, sounds like I'm just peddling our services, which of course I always am, but it is making sure that you don't try and do it all yourself, and professional development time in legal seminars, listening to how the law is being applied, what's going on in, like I said, applying things. So it's really make sure you don't cut corners when it comes to people. And there are businesses like ours that are affordable. Like we have different service levels. We have a subscription service where the benefit to it is the complimentary consulting that goes along with it. So there is ways to get really, reasonable consulting. And I think that's my only advice, is just because some people think HR is easy, and some of it might be. And it also depends on the type of person you are. Some people are very natural at dealing with people, and some people shouldn't deal with people. So
Some people work in finance.
Some people work in finance.
We're less good at dealing with people. No, it is true. And I think one of the things that people don't understand sometimes is that there's such a vast amount of information and regulatory bodies and all these different things that as a business owner, it's not fun to deal with that, right? Like you look in Alberta we've got WCB. Well, there's an entity that, you need to manage, and you need to make sure you have policies in place around worker safety. And what happens if somebody does get hurt? Then what are you doing on the back to work program? Like I know for our business, we operate, most of our stuff is out of BC actually. So now we get to learn that side of it, because WCB Alberta is different than what they've got in BC there. So definitely there's a lot of intricacies, and I think geography plays into that as well.
Yeah.
What about advice for somebody that maybe is sitting saying, I want to get involved in the human resources field? What advice would you have for them?
Oh, well, a lot of HR people start in recruiting just because a lot of firms or whatever hire junior recruiters. So a lot of people make a career out of that. It's great. but a lot of people can start there. So it's really, of course, do you have the educational background to get into it? That's a key. And it's really, looking for actually one of the ways that a lot of people get into HR is kind of that office manager / HR assistant role or HR admin role. So we've actually mentored people. We've gone in and they've wanted to grow in HR and they've started in that area. So that is also a good way to enter into the field, is when you get into the smaller businesses that don't have the money. So they put you in a couple of roles and you just, take control of your own learning from there, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and HR is one of those, and sorry, correct me if I'm wrong in this, but HR is one of those fields where there's so much information online and so much information readily available that education is very important, but you can self-educate a lot in that field as well, right?
Yeah.
You have to be willing to put in the time, the effort, and the blood, sweat, and tears into it. But to your point, if you get into one of those organizations, learn.
Yeah.
Go out and learn.
A part of the book like that we wrote, it's really like I said, you have certain level of responsibility, you have a box that you fit in, and that's your role. You have a lot of support. When you're in that small to mid-sized business, it's very different, right? So it's really experience. We're fortunate. We have a lot of, stories that our consultants can share amongst our team in what may have worked, what may not have worked. And so a lot of that in that size business is experience. It's experiential learning. So get involved, be active in, get involved in what's going on in the company.
Yeah, for sure. You kind of gave an intro into my next question there, and I was going to talk about the book that you co-authored there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really, me and my partner, Ashley, we always talked about all the stories that we had, and writing a book is always something I wanted to do. And so I had a really good friend that is a ghostwriter, so she kind of helped. And it's really just looking at HR, kind of all the different aspects of leadership and bringing someone in through an organization to the eventual exit. But it's more storytelling. It's, we've got quite some funny stories, to the point where one guy was leaving an interview and he hit my partner's car on the way out. So he didn't get the job, but it wasn't because he hit the car. But of course, that's what he'll always think. But, so just there's some stories about that, and just some tidbits of tips around difficult conversations. But it's more from our experience and our stories.
Yeah. Okay. That's very cool. Very cool. What have you seen as the evolution of human resources, maybe over the last decade or 2 decades?
I think it's just the evolution is really being adaptable, because things have changed so quickly. Like, we talked about legislation. Well, employment standards legislation hadn't changed for years and years and years. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you have to really keep up. It really changed. Of red tape, they call it, and it did really help employers. So there's been a lot of changes in legislation. COVID changed a lot. And because of COVID, expectations on both employers and employees have changed a lot. Generations, millennials, Gen Zs, all the names you want to call them there. It's really that it's the evolution of what's going on outside that the field of the practice of HR has to keep up. And, even the whole thing with pronouns and all this stuff that's now affecting the workplace in a positive way. But it's, how do you mesh that with maybe some people that you've got 60-year-olds working with 25-year-olds, very different ideologies, right?
Yeah. This is the second perfect segue you've given me into a question, because my next question was about different generations. And I have actually asked this to probably 10 to 15 guests that I've had on the show. I would have asked this question. And it's about how do we manage these intergenerational relationships, intergenerational maybe expectations. And I'm going to come at this from an employer side. So if I'm running a company and I've got 19-year-olds and 65-year-olds working together, those are very different generations. The communication is different. The expectations are different. How do you manage all of those intricacies within those relationships?
Well, it's more about education, and it's more about understanding your employees, because all 25-year-olds aren't the same. all 60-year-olds aren't the same. So it's really understanding the individuals. Yes, there's some generalities that you can really put on each of those generations, but I think you really do have to be more open-minded and flexible in today's working world.
Yeah.
Understanding there's so much information out there on that. And it's also from a leadership perspective, if you see something going sideways between those, generations or reporting relationships, you got to get on top of it. And it's really oftentimes more of an education.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
The consultants that you have working for you, do you have any remote consultants, or do you do remote work, or?
Oh, yeah. I would say probably 75% of our work is remote.
Okay.
We all have home offices. I have an office, but it's kind of a come and go because we're at client site. We all have our home offices. I mean, I've worked remote for 20 some years. So I even worked remote at the big oil and gas company, which was unheard of back then.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, unheard of. So anyways, I was dealing with overseas, so the time was great because I'm a early bird. But so they do, but we are all on site as well at clients, but just not full time. Like none of us, that's not our model, work full time on site. It's just not our model.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's cool. Oh, well, and again, it goes back to that flexibility, right? That people can have on the consultant side. Yeah, it's funny you say like 20 years ago would be unheard of for people that might be a little bit younger listening to the podcast. They might not quite understand why, but like this whole thing that we're doing right now, video talk, looked very, very different 20 years ago. Most people did not have that. Teleconferencing, not so easy.
No.
A different world. Yeah. So what's on the horizon for you and the company? What are you guys looking to do?
Well, it's interesting. We are trying to, we've put out our first online training course, got into that world just because we've been asked about it so much. So we have a subscription service. So we're really trying to just sort of step into a little bit of new territory, making it easier for clients and for my own business, a little bit more passive income, product-based, that kind of thing, right? So that's kind of what's new on the horizon for us. Just, grow. It's really like, it's kind of what comes first, the cart or the horse. We get clients, consultants. It's a fine, for anybody out there listening that has a consultancy base. It's, you don't want to have a consultant with no work, but then you don't want to get the work but don't have a consultant to do it. So it's a fine dance really to get that ratio right.
It's that balancing act, right? You're always trying to keep it in balance, and it always wants to teeter one way or the other, and hopefully it's always teetering on more work and having to bring on additional consultants in the end, right?
Yeah, or I do it myself.
Or you do it yourself.
I find someone.
If somebody wanted to maybe learn more about you, maybe even learn about some of the services that you guys are offering, or connect with you, where would they go for that?
Website's the best place. It's wendyelleninc.ca. So the company name.ca. All our information is on there, our products, our team, contact information, all that stuff. Yeah, best place to go.
Awesome. Well, Wendy, I certainly want to appreciate you for being on the show with us today, and got a lot of insight out of you, and definitely appreciate having you here.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's fun.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Want to be our next guest? Visit beyondwealthpodcast.ca/guest. See you on the next episode.